My name is Tim Stover, and on behalf of the OSU School of History, Philosophy, and Religion, and as well as the members of our planning team and our sponsors, I welcome you to this event in our 31st annual Holocaust Memorial Week observance here at OSU. The presentation this night features what has become known as our survivor speaker, as we welcome Lucille Eichengreen, who is a survivor of several Nazi prison camps, including the extermination complex at Auschwitz in Poland, where she survived a selection process by the infamous Dr. Mengele, work camps at the Sauerufer near her home city of Hamburg, Germany, Neuengamme complexes, and finally Bergen-Belsen, where the British liberated the camp in March of 1945. Before going any further with the introduction of Lucille, I will introduce and welcome Biff Traber, the mayor of Corvallis, who will share with us a proclamation regarding this Holocaust observance on behalf of our larger community. Biff Traber, please join me in welcoming Biff.
I wanted to start off saying thank you for allowing me to continue what I've been discovering is a very long tradition of mayors coming to read this proclamation. I'm honored to be here tonight to read the proclamation, to represent what I think of as a great city. And I wanted to take this opportunity to go a little bit off script or off intention before reading the proclamation, because I wanted to point out one of the things that makes Corvallis, to me, a great city. And it was something that I had really not understood fully until after last fall's election. And I'll begin with saying the words you'll hear in the proclamation do speak to me about remembrance and dedication to not repeating some of that history. It also speaks my views about my views and values, and as you'll see tonight, I will be signing it and leaving it tonight. Some of the important words in there are things like confronting hate, dedication to individual freedom, respect for all. Very similar words are a key part of our city charter. And those of you who probably aren't as nerdy as I am to know what a city charter is and to recognize it as a constitution of the city. It's the document the state allowed us to put together as a city back when, enumerating the powers we have and our responsibilities. There's a section in that charter that has many parallel words talking about our responsibility to all people. That we're a community that honors diversity and aspires to be free of prejudice, bigotry, and hate. These are values of Corvallis. And that's why it's important to me to be able to continue this tradition, to be able to come here tonight and read this proclamation, a proclamation of Days of Remembrance, April 24th to April 27th, 2017. Whereas the Holocaust was the state-sponsored, systematic persecution and annihilation of European Jewry by Nazi Germany and its collaborators between 1933 and 1945, 6 million were murdered. Roma, that is gypsies, people with disabilities, and Poles were also targeted for destruction or decimation for racial, ethnic, or national reasons. And millions more, including homosexuals, Jehovah's Witnesses, Soviet prisoners of war, political dissidents, also suffered grievous oppression and death under Nazi tyranny. And whereas the history of the Holocaust offers an opportunity to reflect on the moral responsibilities of individuals, societies, and governments, and whereas we, the people of the city of Corvallis, should always remember the terrible events of the Holocaust and remain vigilant against hatred, persecution, and tyranny. And whereas we, the people of the city of Corvallis, should actively rededicate ourselves to the principles of individual freedom in a just society, and whereas the days of remembrance have been set aside for the people of the city of Corvallis to remember the victims of the Holocaust, as well as to reflect on the need for respect for all peoples, And whereas pursuant to an act of Congress, Public Law 96-388, October 7, 1980, the United States Holocaust Memorial Council designates the days of remembrance of the victims of the Holocaust to be April 24th through April 27th, 2017, including the day of remembrance known as Yom HaShoah, April 23rd, 2017. Now therefore I, Biff Traber, Mayor of Corvallis, do hereby proclaim the week of April 24th through April 27th, 2017 as days of remembrance in memory of the victims of the Holocaust and in honor of the survivors, as well as the rescuers and the liberators. I also proclaim the days of April 24th through April 27th, 2017 to be Holocaust Memorial Week, a time for our community to reflect on genocides past and present and what can be done to reduce the threat of genocide in the future. We as Corvallis community members should work to promote human dignity and confront hate whenever and wherever it occurs. Thank you.
So it is my privilege to introduce Cecilia Landau, as she was born in 1925 as the first child of Benjamin and Sala Landau, who were Jewish Polish nationals who were living in Hamburg, Germany. The first several years of Cecilia's life were marked by a loving family and an extensive network of friends and enriching opportunities, experiences that provided her with positive memories that may have been a source of sustenance and hope through the next portion of her life. Lucille is known for her memory, her remarkable memory, a gift in ways that it has contributed to our deeper understanding of what we now know as the Holocaust. There was a sudden turn in the life of 8-year-old Cecilia as Adolf Hitler and the rise of the Third Reich provided an all too fertile ground for the growth of anti-Semitism that would become the Holocaust as they took care of the Jews, a line that Lucille uses in her memoir. From the years of later childhood through the formative years of her adolescence and on into young adulthood, Cecilia survived the ever-deepening degradation of her Jewish identity alongside the devastating deprivation of her basic needs and literal hungers as a human being. As a gift, her memory was both blessing and curse. Blessing in the ways that it seemingly contributed to her survival, including her facility with German, English, French, and Polish languages, clear on through to helping to hold accountable 40-plus German soldiers and staff from the Bergen-Belsen work camp for their criminal mistreatment of Cecilia and the other prisoners at the camp. It was a curse in the way that it showed up as nightmares that all too often robbed her of precious hours of sleep and escape from the horrors of prison camp life. My sense, from reading her excellent reflections on her Holocaust experience, is that she might also be known for her wisdom, a gift of proportion that might not have otherwise been expected in such a young person. Her gift of wisdom showed up in varied ways, such as applying makeup to the face of her 12-year-old sister Karen to help her face appear older and thus more useful to the Germans rather than being selected for execution as a useless, burdensome child. I'm sorry to say that Cecilia was not successful in this effort. She was successful as she and her prison camp friend, Ellie, wisely conspired to change their last names such that they might remain together in various camp settings and thus be critical sources of support for one another. And her wisdom showed up again as the British soldiers who liberated the Bergen-Belsen camp compassionately but naively provided these starved prisoners with a sudden wealth of food. Cecilia somehow knew that her body needed a slower adjustment to these new riches and disciplined herself to continue to ration her approach to food, while at the same time she watched fellow prisoners die literally overnight from the impact of their enjoyment of this food. Lucille Eichengreen this night shares these remarkable gifts of memory and wisdom with us. This is an act of hope that in her sharing we too might be challenged to both remember and to gain wisdom from the experiences of the Holocaust, wherein a people, particularly the Jews, became the targets upon whom a nation projected their own perceived problems, misfortunes, and challenges, and who took care of them by eliminating them, scapegoating them by the millions. We live in challenging times when our all too human propensity for projecting our perceived problems and challenges onto those we see as other is all too evident. In the process, we see them as less than fully human and try to make them scapegoats for our troubles. I invite you to please listen carefully this night that we might bear witness to this sharing of memory and wisdom. Will you please join with me and we share a warm OSU and Corvallis welcome to Lucille Cecilia Eichengreen.
The First World War ended in 1918, and shortly thereafter, 2 young people left their native Poland to settle in the small German town of Cottbus, where they finally met. They married in 1922 and moved to Hamburg, Germany, to start a business and subsequently became my parents. As a young, curious child, I frequently overheard them talking in Polish and kept asking why they had left Poland. Their answers were short and too complicated for me to comprehend. We are Jewish, and life in Poland was often frightening. The Catholic Poles did not like us. As a preschooler, I accepted their words, not really knowing what they meant, but I realized that they obviously did not want me to learn Polish. I started school in 1930, a semi-private, semi-Orthodox Jewish school for girls. My questions, why not a school in our neighborhood or in our area, always received the same answer. You will be happier and you will learn a great deal more in this school. My life at home was happy, carefree, and I knew I was loved by caring parents and later by a little sister. My life took a turn early in 1933. The incidents were significant from the very beginning and way beyond the comprehension of a third grader in 1933. We overheard many remarks made by our parents, teachers, and hostile neighbors. We were often admonished by our parents and teachers not to sit down in the streetcar, but to stand in the back, not to walk in large groups or to talk loudly, and not to respond when our neighbors cursed us. Our question as to why remained unanswered, but it was obvious to us that we had to be careful. It was October 1938 when we heard a loud knock on our door. It was early in the morning. We had been forced to move from our apartment at Hoheweide to Luftchaussee. It was shortly before 6 a.m. when my father talked to the local policeman at the front door. I overheard most of the conversation. The police were rounding up Polish Jewish nationals. My father promised to go alone and managed to talk him out of taking my mother, my sister, and me. Hours later, we received a phone call that all these men, women, and children were kept in an open area, and we had instructions to pack a suitcase and bring it to my father. Hurriedly, we assembled a suitcase of clothing for him, and I was to bring the suitcase. Alone, upset and worried, I found the place with hundreds of other families, fathers, mothers, and children. The gate was wide open. I found my father and suggested to him that he come home with me since there were no guards. Dad's reply was, "This would not be honest," and he pushed me through the open gate. "Go home, do not worry," were his last words to me. The next day we heard that all these human beings had been transported to the Polish border at Sponsin. Father managed to stay there with a local family for several weeks when it became evident that he would not get permission to return. And then he took the train to Mother's former home in Sambor, Poland. He stayed there with Mother's family. All our efforts to get a visa for his return were denied. On November 9th, 1938, on my morning walk to school, I passed the large local synagogue. The synagogue was in flames, as were mountains of books, prayer books on the outside. Laughing Germans and the SA in full uniform were loud, drunk, laughing, enjoying the tragedy. Frightened, I returned home. On the way, I saw smashed windows of Jewish shops. The Jewish neighborhood was badly damaged, and the merchandise from the stores was swimming in the open fleets. The telephone rang all day. Jewish men were arrested and taken to a concentration camp near Berlin. 6 to 8 weeks later, they were released with shaven heads, broken bones, and tried to leave Germany as soon as possible to anywhere. They did not talk, but we could read the horror in their eyes. It was now called Kristallnacht, or the night of broken glass. We had to move again. German orders. This time a furnished room on Werder Street 5. We still hoped for Father's return and a visa for Palestine. We waited. Late in May 1939, my father received permission to return to us for 4 weeks. We managed to extend his stay and his visa twice, each time for a mere 4 weeks. But September 1st, 1939 caught up with us. Again, early in the morning hours, 2 men from the Gestapo showed up to intern my father, an enemy alien. Poland had been invaded and Germany was at war. The war came to an end less than 2 weeks later. The interned Jews were shipped to a concentration camp, and we received 2 letters with short messages dated Dachau, Germany. I am well, love, Benno. We still tried for a visa and to get father released. It was not possible. February 1941. Again, 2 Gestapo men throwing a cigar box on the kitchen table. Ashes, Benjamin Landau. And they left. Before long, we were assigned to a shared room with other people in the same apartment. We had to share a bathroom with 8 people. And living conditions were on ration cards, special stores for the Jews. And a year later, we were earmarked with a yellow star, meaning that we went onto the streets, we were accosted, we were beaten, and we were called hideous names. The neighborhood children would not speak to us, they would beat us up, and we were very, very frightened. In 1941, in fall, we became notification to report to a large building in downtown Hamburg. There were 1,100 of us. We were the first transport from northern Germany into the ghettos of Poland. We were loaded into trains, guarded from the outside, not knowing our destination. We arrived at a spot that was neither a railroad station nor looked like a city. It was a Baluti section of the city in Lodz, in downtown Lodz, which was an industrial city. We were marched to apartments. We shared a room with 8 other people. We got 3 wooden cots and food ration cards. The Balut section in the Lodz Ghetto did not have canalization. The water and the garbage ran down the gutter. We took water in large buckets up to the 2nd floor from a pump in the backyard. There were no bathrooms. We had an outhouse in the yard. Living conditions coming from a, what I would call normal circumstance, were almost impossible. We received food at irregular intervals, and the food was not enough to sustain our hunger. We lived across the bridge, and underneath the wooden bridge were the streetcars of the Poles. They were guarded by German military with drawn guns. We could not pass other than over the wooden bridge. I had to pass every day to get to work. We worked in factories. We made hats for the ladies in Germany. We made uniforms for the German Wehrmacht. We made furniture for the stores in Germany. Our only payment was occasional food. A loaf of bread had to last 7 days. Sometimes frozen turnips, squashy frozen potatoes, and a large bag of useless salt. Hunger took its toll. My mother became lethargic. She got sick and died in her sleep of hunger on July 13th, 1942. We had barely escaped an April deportation of the unemployed, which were mainly Jews who had been deported into the ghetto from Prague, from Vienna, from Holland, from Luxembourg, from Germany and Austria. At the height of the ghetto population counted 200,000. There is a ghetto cemetery left with over 70,000 dead. The rest were deported again and killed in other camps. September 1942. Rumkowski, the German-appointed Jewish head of the ghetto, made his now infamous speech. "Give me your children for deportation." The Germans demand 20,000 old people and children, and it will assure us to continue living. The outcries were huge. No one handed over a child. The Germans grew impatient and ordered a 7-day curfew, or as it's now called, a Sperre, and confinements to our rooms. They were taking trucks and military guards from street to street, from house to house. We assembled in the yard, and they picked the young, the old, and those who seemed unable to do a lot of work. We never heard or saw any of them again. They were taken to Chelmo, about an hour's drive from the ghetto. They were gassed and murdered and buried. And when the Germans retreated from the Russian invasion, they opened the graves and burned the bodies. Nothing remained of the 100,000 people. Ghetto life continued. Shorter food rations, while we were still manufacturing goods for the Germans. We received for our work a watery noonday soup. 1943 was a long and cold winter. There was a small stove in our room, but no wood and no coal to heat it. The windows looked out on the barbed wires and the German guard below. I survived a merciless beating by the Gestapo. Somebody had denounced that all the Landaus in the ghetto had radios. I did not have a radio. I never had one. And I returned back to work with a bruised face and loss of my hearing on the left ear that evening. For us, there was no end in sight. We made it through summer when large notices were posted announcing the total liquidation of the ghetto, street by street, starting August 1944. Our first day, I made the long walk to the Radega station at the end of the ghetto. All I took was my briefcase with documents. I met my friend Ellie and her family at the station, and together we entered the mud-spattered cattle cars. No one knew where we would be taken. The long, slow ride came to an abrupt stop early one morning. Shouting Germans with their barking dogs opened the doors and hurried us along the platform. Men and women were separated. The long line of men slowly disappeared in the distance. A capo, which was a Jewish prisoner policeman appointed by the Germans, asked us whether Rumkowski had come with us. We told them no. Those who had been sent there previously were waiting for Rumkowski and for revenge. We asked them, where are we? The curt reply was Auschwitz, the place we had never heard of. An SS man stopped in front of me, ordered me to drop the briefcase. Ellie tore it from my hand, dropped it to the ground, and the SS man shouted, "You saved yourself a beating." Swiftly we were separated, the young from the old. Children with mothers were taken to a separate group. We were marched into a barracks, ordered to undress, remove all jewelry, and pushed into another area. The SS women ordered camp inmates to shave our head. No tattoos on that day. Shower heads protruded from the ceiling. A whisper went through the rows. Gas or water? It was our lucky day. A little bit of water trickled over us. We were thrown one garment. No shoes, no underwear. We were marched into another barracks. A whispered message informed us. Crematorium, gas chambers. We did not comprehend. The next barrack building was empty. No cots, no wooden bridges, just a small area on the floor to accommodate 5 people. We could not stretch out, we could not sleep, and every morning we were counted outside, received a small piece of bread and a dark liquid, and were herded back into the barracks. Alice had been given a pair of wooden clocks, in which we used as soup plates and guarded them from theft. Weeks passed. One morning we were ordered to remove our one garment and pass an inspection of 3 SS men. Except for Alice, we were motioned to the left, Alice to the right. We were then marched to another barracks building, given a dress, a jacket, and ill-fitting shoes. Then another cattle car for a long trip. After several days, the cattle car stopped. We had arrived at Dessauer Ufer, a former warehouse in the city of Hamburg. There were 500 women. In the mornings, we were marched in groups of 20 to workplaces cleaning out rubble from past bombings. It was winter now and bitter cold. The SS wore coats, hats and gloves, and guarded us with guns. A piece of bread and a little bit of soup at night was our reward. We were again pushed into trucks and taken into a sub-labor camp or concentration camp of Neuengamme in the city of Sasel. It is now a very elegant local neighborhood, very expensive, and nothing marks the former concentration camp, but a stone at a hardly visible corner that states that 500 women had been housed here in barracks. Most of us were Polish, and our camp was guarded by SS men and women. Somehow, somebody mentioned the fact that I spoke German, and I was working with another young woman in the German camp office, making out records, mainly of the SS personnel, their names, their addresses, their families. And we were yelled at or kicked when we did not work fast enough. One morning, a number of trucks appeared. Again, we were on the open flatbed truck, and the vehicles drove for several hours. It was sometime in March. We arrived in Bergen-Belsen, a small barracks for 500 of us. The dead covered the walkways, large pits of naked, decaying bodies, and latrines and washrooms had no water. It soon became clear to us that we would not survive Bergen-Belsen. Food was distributed irregularly, and typhoid took its toll. April 15, 1945. The loud noises made us curious, and outside the barbed wire, we saw rows of tanks. We waited. The men came out of the tanks in British uniforms, and we started to scream. A noise of liberation and an end to 4 long years. I started translating for the British. I saw more than 10,000 unburied bodies, and they had to be buried with bulldozers. They are now marked in mass graves, but we have no names and no details. Among them, the Frank sisters. They were not found, we did not know of them, but their father set 2 gravestones on the main avenue of Bergen-Belsen with their names, but they had not buried there. They had just died 2 weeks prior to liberation. My only wish remained, would I find my sister, and when could I leave Germany? I got in touch with my family in Palestine, my cousins in England, but the wait was long. I wrote down the names and addresses of the SS men who had guarded us in Sasel. Colonel Tilling was interested but could not believe me. All 42 SS men and women were picked up and imprisoned. I walked past their cells and heard their cries. We were always decent. Help us. I walked in silence. It was November 45. I received handwritten notes pushed under the door of the dormitory where we lived now. The note said the same. We will find you and kill you. I put the notes on Colonel Tilling's desk and waited. In December, I received notification that 3 other women and I would be driven through Holland into Belgium and then into Lille, France. We had dinner in a small bar. Captain Alexander, his driver, and I. Returning outside, Our car had been stolen, and with it my very few possessions. Alexander bought me a ticket to Paris and gave me his few French francs. I arrived early in the morning in Paris. The address to the Jewish youth hostel on the Rue de Rosier was a long ride away. I managed in my poor French and got the information I needed. In the dormitory, I received a bed and a daily fish soup. 2 days later, I was at the American Embassy to get all documents required for immigration. I received an affidavit from a classmate. I received in temporary Polish passports. They did not want to give passports to Jews. And passage on an empty merchant marine ship returning from Bordeaux to New York. It took 26 days on the open ocean with a small ship. I was sick the whole time. It sounds simple now, but it took 3 months and endless efforts, and I arrived in New York on March 26, 1946. I stayed for a couple of days with my old friend. I went to work in a factory sewing gloves. I went at night when I could to Queens College. I met my husband in New York at a dinner party, and his last name sounded familiar. I asked him for the first names, and it turned out that I had known his parents in the ghetto. They did not survive the war. And it was the only time on the way back to my furnished room that I told him the story of the past and the story of his parents. We lived in New York for 4 years. Then we moved to Berkeley, California, first San Francisco, then to Berkeley, California, and my 2 sons were born in California. I try not to think about the past. Once in a while there is a nightmare, but life here has been good to me. Thank you.